Hey guys, welcome to today's video. Today we are going to be doing a review on the Covergirl Outlast Active Foundation with SPF 20. It's a 24-hour foundation. This one is in the shade Classic Ivory 810. What I'm going to do today is tell you a little bit about the promises of this foundation. I'm going to show you my first impression day with it, where I wear it with no primer and no powders just to see how it performs. And then I have little snippets of other days that I spent testing where I tried different primers and different powders. I also tested it on a lot of days that I didn't film, and I will be back here at the end to tell you my final thoughts on this foundation, who it may be good for, how it performs best, if it performs good at all, performs well at all. I will put timestamps down below for all of that. So let's start talking about this foundation. This was one of these finds that just happened. I was at Shoppers Drug Mart, which is a Canadian drugstore chain, and I was just kind of perusing around and seeing what was there. And I saw these were on one of those like cardboard displays. I feel like this is new. I don't feel like I've heard anybody talk about it. So I looked through the shades that were there. They didn't have any testers or anything, so I kind of had to make a guess. And this ended up costing me $9.99 Canadian. It was on sale a little bit, so I feel like it might normally be in the $12 to $15 range, but it is pretty well priced for a foundation at the drugstore in Canada. You do get 1 fluid ounce of product in here. It is just a little squeezy tube with a flip cap. And let's see what it says and promises about this foundation from Covergirl. Covergirl doesn't actually tell us very much about this foundation. It says, discover a foundation that lasts all day long. Outlast Active Foundation is sweat-proof, transfer-proof, and humidity-proof for up to 24 hours and doesn't clog pores. Available in 16 shades. Not the greatest shade range, especially since this is like the third lightest one. So there's a number of light ones there, which doesn't leave a lot of room in the rest of the spectrum. But I was surprised to find out, it says on their website that they are now Leaping Bunny cruelty-free certified. So I don't know when that happened, that Covergirl stopped testing on animals, but it does appear that they are cruelty-free now. Now that I've told you a little bit about the foundation, let's take a look at the shade of 810 Classic Ivory as compared to a few other foundations in my collection. So here we go for swatches. Here we have the Covergirl Outlast Active in 810 Classic Ivory. This is L'Oreal True Match in N2. L'Oreal True Match in C2. This is the Milk Makeup Blur Liquid in Ivory. And this is the Sephora Make No Mistake Stick Foundation in Birch. Okay, that is everything I can tell you about the foundation. Let's get into the first impression day footage. I have no idea what the coverage of this is going to be like. I also don't necessarily know if this is going to be the best shade match for me, but we're going to do what we can do and then adjust through the week. So one of the things that I found when I was buying this in the store that I didn't love is these are sitting out and there's no way to know whether somebody has opened one and like used some of it because there's no seal or anything on it and you don't unwrap the bottle, which I don't love. But it is just a squeeze tube. I'm just going to put a little bit on the back of my hand so that I can pick it up and blend it from there. I think we're going to be good for match. Maybe a touch dark, but we'll see. For this first application day, I'm not wearing any primer and I'm going to do minimal powdering, maybe just where I need to blend things, because I want to see just how the foundation does on its own. When I was growing up, we didn't use primers or anything, so we're going to see how it does. I have moisturized my face with my daily moisturizer. I've let that sink in for probably about 5 to 10 minutes now, and I'm going to go in with a brush all over my face. That's what I tend to use. I don't tend to use beauty blenders quite as much. I prefer to use a brush, a little bit of foundation, and a lot of blending. So yeah, that looks like a good match. It has a very foundation smell to it. So far I'm thinking this seems to have really nice undertones to it. It doesn't look really pink or really yellow. It appears to be sort of medium coverage. It's blending everything out in terms of taking away any redness, but I do have a little pimple right there that it's not really covering. but it does seem to be blending nicely and sort of sinking into my skin. And it still seems to be letting a lot of the shine that I have on my skin from my moisturizer come through. I am gonna have to use more though. I use that all up. Now this brush is a very dense brush. This is a Crown chisel brush, so it's not really, it's very small for blending foundation, but it works well. But it was clean, so it probably just soaked up a lot of that foundation, and I'll probably get better coverage or better use of the foundation from here on out. And I will be zooming you all in to see how this all looks once I get it on and blend it. I'm really liking the tone of this and how dewy it looks at the moment. There we go. Now that the brush has soaked in a bit from the first round, I'm getting a lot better. It's going a lot further now. It looks to be drying down a little bit more matte than it goes on. But I am really impressed with how smooth this is making everything and how it's not clinging or looking cakey at all. Let me zoom you in and I will give you a little tour of how it's looking on my face. So I'm really liking the way that it is sitting. I tend to have problems with foundations looking a little cakey right there and gathering around these sort of wrinkles that I have around my lips. But it seems to be looking good. Now, I do find that I always see more stuff when I'm editing video than I do when I'm actually looking in real life. But I'm loving the shine that this has so far. It seems to be sort of a light medium coverage going in with the brush the way that I did. There's a slight bit of tackiness still, but it feels like it's setting down. And it's just looking very healthy. I think my favorite thing so far is that the undertones match me really well from what I can tell, unless this sort of changes shades as it dries down and gets darker. As I said, oftentimes I look at foundations and they look too yellow for me or maybe too pink for me, and this one seems to be just exactly the right shade, which is awesome. So I'm going to go get the rest of my makeup on and then I'll be back to tell you anything more that I've learned from makeup application. So I finished up my makeup, and while it still does have the slightest little bit of tackiness to the touch, I was able to blend some blush on top of it, a little bit of highlight, and I'm really liking the way it's looking. Now, looking in the mirror out where I get a little bit more light, I can see that it's maybe a touch darker than my natural skin tone. It may have dried down a little bit darker, but not noticeably so, and a shade that would look probably perfect on me in the summer. It's probably the kind of thing where if I went a shade lighter, it would be too light, so I do think this is making me look like a nice healthy glow. It does emphasize just a little bit, I feel, my pores, but I think that's just because it is still looking a little bit dewy and a little bit glowy, and things that are a little bit glowy are sometimes going to emphasize a little bit of pores. Overall, it does look smoothing. I just do notice them a little bit. So I'm just going to zoom you in to show you what it looks like. It's not much different because I didn't powder on top of it other than a little bit of blush. So I'm just trying to let it do its thing today, but let's zoom in and look. So I see a little bit of emphasis of pores right here, but a little too bright. There, that's gonna let you see. So I do see a little bit of emphasis of pores right there, but again, it's because there's a glow, and I did add a little bit of highlight there, but you can see, I hope, that there's still a fair bit of glow and dew to the foundation itself. You can sort of see on my nose there. And although it may be a little bit off in terms of shade, it's looking really good. I'm very happy with it so far. It's currently just coming up on 9 o'clock, but I probably put the foundation on about 20 minutes ago. So let's just say about 8:30 as the time, and then I'll do some check-ins through the day. Hey guys, it is 12:30, so this has been on for about 4 hours. I have been looking close up at my face, and I have noticed some things. Not looking quite as great as when it started. Not the worst, but having a couple of little issues. I have noticed that the glow that was there is starting to go away a little bit until but an hour ago I could still really see that sort of glow and dew on my forehead, and I do still somewhat see it. Like, it's not becoming matte. I notice much more, and maybe if I sort of dim the lights a little bit here, you can see that I do feel like the dry down has made me a little bit more orange, and you do see more of a difference between my face and my neck than I did when I first applied it. Let me zoom you in and show you a couple things super up close and personal that I'm noticing on my face. So where I'm starting to notice it not looking so great the most is around my mouth. So I have a number of lines around my lips and also just a bit of texture there. And I noticed that it's starting to gather and grab a little bit at the texture, but mostly just that with one of the wrinkles I have on my lips, it's starting to separate in that wrinkle. So once already I've sort of patted at it to smooth it out over, but if you can see right here, I know I'm making funny faces, but if I sort of spread my lips out, you can see where it's no longer sort of smoothing over those areas. And you know, I can sort of pat it and move it around and bring it back, but it is starting to look not the greatest right there. Now, unless you're super up close and personal, you're not going to see that, but that's what a review is for. It's still looking really good on my forehead and on my cheeks. Maybe a little bit of gathering sort of in my nose fold there, but really it's more around where I have wrinkles around my mouth that I'm starting to notice a little bit of gathering, a little bit of cakiness, a little bit of emphasizing my wrinkles. So that's where we are. I will be back in another few hours to give you more of what I am seeing. Hey guys, it is 4:30, so this has been on for 8 hours. And I just took a close-up look at it before coming in here to sit down and film. It's looking like it's starting to get a little oily on my forehead. It doesn't feel oily at all. Like, it feels a little oily when I touch it. It doesn't feel like my face is oily when I'm just sort of sitting here. And it's looking a little shiny in the camera, but I honestly didn't notice that until I sat down. I'm not finding it's gotten any worse in terms of sort of separating in my wrinkles. It's still doing it, but it's no worse than it was at the 4-hour mark. So this doesn't look like it's consistently getting any worse looking. The few little flaws that I noticed earlier on are still there, but not getting any worse. I still see my blush hanging in there. I still see coverage. And also I've kind of been rubbing at my nose a little bit, and I don't notice a huge amount of it transferred off considering the amount I've been rubbing. Although I do see a lot more oiliness on my forehead and sort of looks like on my cheeks than in the camera than I do in real life. So yeah, so far so good considering, again, this is with no primer and no powders. I may try to do another check-in later, especially if I notice anything significantly different. So on with the video. Hey guys, I don't have my phone on me to show you the time, but it is just after 8 o'clock and I've had this on for almost 12 hours now. I am looking shiny and oily. You can see all that shine going on. It's on my cheeks as well. I mean, it doesn't feel super oily, but it looks pretty oily. It's worn off a bit on my chin. Now this is supposed to be transfer proof. I did go outside. It's a blizzard right now, and I had my hood on and sort of the cover was rubbing a little bit. So that did rub off a little, but I'm not sure how much I would expect foundations to stay on through being rubbed against a parka. So it's looking pretty good for the 12-hour mark. It hasn't like moved into my pores at all. It's looking shiny, but I can actually still see some of my blush there, so it's hanging in. And I have been rubbing at my nose. So although it's not perfect, like I wouldn't be embarrassed to go out right now in this. It doesn't look terrible. It doesn't look great, but it doesn't look terrible. And considering this was no primer, no powder, no touch-ups during the day, not looking too bad for 12 hours. So testing will continue so that we can get all the goods and bads and the best way to use this foundation. So I'll be back with more information. On day 2 of using this foundation, I went in with a slightly lighter touch with the foundation, but also this time I've used a primer. I used the Professional, so a smoothing pore filling primer, in those areas that I found my pores were emphasized a little bit, and then also around my nose, around my lip wrinkles, and down here into this area, as that's where I was finding it was gathering in my first trial day. I've still not put any powder on top so that I can see how it performs, just with the additional layer of a primer to solve some of the problems I was seeing yesterday. So this has been on for an hour or two at this point, and I'll just zoom you in to take a look. I'm finding that the primer is doing its job. I'm not seeing the cakiness or the separation in my wrinkles that I saw yesterday, and it again is looking quite smooth and seems to be emphasizing my pores just a little bit less. Hopefully you can see that. So I'll keep an eye on it, but this seems like a good solution so far. So today is day 3, and I'm really liking the way it looks. I just used a plain Smashbox photo primer, photo focus primer, whatever it is, and then set it with a little bit of finishing powder and then use some setting spray. Today's going to be a trial though, because I'm out in the snow and the cold, and it's gonna have things rubbing against it, and my nose is likely to run. So right now it looks flawless. We'll see how it looks as the day goes along. Let me tell you right off the bat, I like this foundation. I found ways to make it work, and make it work sounds like it was difficult to work with. It wasn't. That first impression day, it was a little bit shiny in some areas. It highlighted my pores a little bit, and there was a little bit of gathering, but I found that this foundation loves smoothing primers. So whether that's the Professional or the Cover Effects blurring primer, or even Smashbox Photo Focus Primer, which is just very much a silicone primer, this foundation performs so well with them. So basically what I did to combat those few things that I noticed on the first impression day is that I take a smoothing primer, put it in my pore area, usually do a little bit in the middle of my forehead, around my nose and nostrils, and then all around my lips and upper lip area where I tend to have some fine lines and wrinkles. And ever since I started doing that with either a blurring or pore filling or a smoothing primer, I don't get the separation in my fine lines. I don't have the gathering around, you know, my mouth and nostrils that made it look a little bit heavy, and everything else just looks beautiful. And then when you set it with a powder that also does a little bit of blurring, or even not, and then apply a little bit of setting spray, I am loving how this looks. So I'll zoom you in now. I do have it on. I'm looking a little bronzy because I'm also testing a bronzer, but hopefully you can see how nice this is looking on my skin. So I'm finding that I don't have texture. This is light coverage the way that I apply it, but I like that. It lets my freckles come through but takes away the redness. I don't have any problem with separating or it looking cakey around my nose anymore. It still has a nice glow to it, and the setting spray I used added some more glow, but it just looks like my skin, but better. For any events or things that I've been doing over the last few weeks when I've been testing this, I've had no problem using this as my go-to foundation. Sometimes when I'm testing foundations, I just don't use them if I know I really want to look good because I just can't trust them. But with this one, I'm really loving the way it looks. So I did try one day to apply it a little more full coverage, and I did that using a sponge because I did find that using a brush, it would leave a few streak marks until you really blended it. So I didn't think that going in to try to get more coverage with a brush was going to work well. What I found is if you use more of this with a beauty blender, it builds up to like maybe higher medium coverage. So I'm just gonna zoom you in a little bit again. I have this dark freckle right here, and I was not able to get the foundation to cover that freckle even when I tried to build it up. So if you do have a lot of acne or darker scarring or things that you really want to cover, it's not going to do that. If you want something that takes away the redness and just blurs and makes your skin look really nice but very natural, you're going to like this. The way in the end that I found that I really liked applying this, and it was the easiest to apply, was I would put a small amount on the back of my hand, and you really don't need very much, like less than a full pump of foundation. And then I've just been using this slightly fluffier foundation brush. This is a Luxie 660 Precision Foundation brush. And what this is able to do is I would pick up the foundation, tap it on my face all over to spread it out a little bit, and then blend. And with this being fluffier, it would really allow me to blend in circles, to work it into my skin quite a bit, and sort of into my nose crease, into areas that have a few more fine lines. And working with less foundation and blending it more would just allow it to really sink into my skin. So I don't find I need a lot of product here, and it just looks very flawless by the time I'm done with it. Now, I did find a couple of times when I had a little bit of dry skin up near my hairline, it did cling to that a little bit. So if you have dry skin in the sense that you have flakiness to your skin, this might not be great for you. If you have dry skin in the sense that it's maybe a little dehydrated, I think you're going to like how glowy this is. I do appreciate that this has SPF in here, because I think the more SPF, the better. I wouldn't trust this as your only SPF. I mean, I use a very tiny amount of this. It's not going to be enough to really protect my skin in the summer. As far as it being sweat proof and transfer proof, I did find that. So if I accidentally rubbed against my face or was laying down on a pillow, it wouldn't transfer. If I was like blowing my nose, because it's been that kind of weather lately and I've been doing that, or I'm wearing my parka where it's rubbing against my chin, you do see foundation coming off onto the tissue or onto the jacket, but you don't have like big marks where it looks like a big division between where your foundation is and where it's been rubbed off. It still looks very good through the day, so it doesn't completely come off if it's been rubbed against. I believe that's all I have to say about this foundation. It's a big thumbs up from me. So if you have skin that is sort of more normal like mine, maybe a little bit on the dry side and a little bit on the oily side in other areas, and you have a few fine lines and you want some light to medium coverage with a bit of SPF that makes your skin look very nice, I think this may be a good go-to, especially since it's from the drugstore. I hope you guys enjoyed this review. If you did and you like these kinds of multi-day reviews where I really test it out in depth before telling you what I think, then leave a thumbs up on this video. Let me know what foundations you want me to try in the comments down below. I do respond to every comment that I get. Thank you so much, guys, and I look forward to seeing you in my next video. Bye!